Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, parents. Welcome to today's Friday Live edition. It's always a pleasure to have you here. It's always a pleasure for you to have you joining us on every week of our Friday Live. And if you are catching a replay, just also let me know you are catching a replay. The message that I can see one person here already. We're just going to take a while to see who I buy for today. So every Friday, in case this is your first time of joining us, my name is Chedozie Eze, and this is Teen Success Academy. Friday Live happens at 3 p.m. every Friday afternoon, and we are able to look into issues that shape the lives of our teenagers and and ultimately the future of our families. That's what this place and the conversations we have every Friday, that's what it is about. And so, welcome to Friday Live. Today's conversation is really about identity, the identity of your teenager. And so, we're discussing identity crisis. And discussing identity crisis, we're going to be talking about identity crisis. So, just a bit of contribution around this. Identity crisis is mostly represented as a phase in the development of a teenager, but it sometimes is not just a passing phase. It is not just a passing phase. It is deep, like what my teenagers say, it is not that deep. This thing is deep. The issues surrounding identity crisis, it is a very deep conversation. It is most times misunderstood, um, a misunderstood battle that many teenagers face. The passive phase of it is the teenage phase. Like being a teenager is a passive phase, right? You get to be a teenager, you turn 13, and at some point you turn 19. And of course, that's the passing phase. But the stage where your teenager is that stage, and this could be quite early, even at preteen, where they are discovering who they are, where they are trying to make sense of who they are meant to be, trying to make sense of how they fit in into their world, but with a world that is filled with expectations. That those expectations are social expectations, family expectations, academic expectations, and all of that. Your teenager is growing up in a world that is filled with all of these expectations, filled with all manner of comparisons, and every generation would have its fair dose of that challenge about comparison. But today's teenager is not having it any less brutal. And so they have expectations to meet, they have comparisons going on, they have a lot of pressures, they have a lot of distractions. It is easy to see why the search for identity can sometimes feel like a crisis for your teenager. So the conversation today is really to walk us through the whole issue of identity crisis as much as possible, and not just to understand it as a problem, but to equip ourselves with practical strategies, with tools to help our teenagers find their footing in their quest for identity, in their quest for a genuine identity, in their quest for a healthy identity. And one of the things you will hear me say very often, and maybe you can put it down in the comment section, it takes a while to build a healthy identity. There is no, it's not a crystal, it's not like my pair of glasses that you can pick up and wear. It takes a while to cultivate a healthy identity. An identity needs to be cultivated. So let's look at understanding what teen identity crisis really is about. In my book, White Teenagers Fail, identity crisis is the prominent issue that when I was writing and discussing from the perspective of a teenager, from the perspective of a young child, when we talk about identity crisis, it's sometimes teenagers that internal battle where we want to be and uh, so the battle is between what they want to be and what they believe that they should be. You know that proverb, train up the child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. It assumes that the trainer understands where this person should be going. And so it's best explain what they really want to be and what they believe they should be. So I want to be A, but I think I should be B. Now, what they believe they should be is influenced by a lot of factors. What they believe they should be is influenced by family, is influenced by parental choices, is influenced by peer pressure, it's influenced by social expectations. And in today's generation, social media will also be included in that bag. So this period of self-discovery can become very confusing because what is generally known and of course is visible is the fact that the child's body is changing. They're experiencing all of these physical changes. However, together with the physical changes come also changes in mental capacity, emotional abilities, and all of that. And so their minds are also changing rapidly, just as quickly as the body is changing. The mind is also changing. I think the science is that the brain develops the fastest between 0 and 4, and then at puberty also, and then somewhere in early adulthood also. In this rapid change, in this mix of confusion and opinions and so many different perspectives, the teenager is trying to make sense of everything. But what then is the identity? So, in simple terms, identity is about understanding who you are, what your beliefs are, what your values are, and then the big question, what your purpose is, and what your role in the society should be. Now, the society, like I said, begins with the immediate family, of course, the school environment, the neighborhood, and things like that. What's my role in this environment? Now, that's the definition or the simple definition for identity, who you are, beliefs, values, purpose, role in society, and stuff like that. But for your teenager, this understanding is still taking shape. And so they are navigating a number of things. I'm going to discuss just about three of them. The first is social identity. Social identity relates to who they are when they are with their peers, who they are when they are with their friends, and who they are generally outside of the home, in school, in church, like I said, with their peers, with their friends, in the neighborhood. That social identity is something that is very important to your teenager. The other component is what I've called cultural identity. Cultural identity is your teenager is also trying to determine, trying to understand how they relate to family background, culture, heritage, the way of doing things from where you are coming from vis-a-vis the society where they are exposed to. Then the ultimate conversation is around personal identity. The personal identity is now their genuine individual sense of self, their individual sense of value, and their ambition. Every child has something. Most times that thing that they want to be is different from what their parents want them to be. So there is personal identity, there is a cultural identity, there is a social identity. And the truth about this phase of life is that teenagers are naturally vulnerable during this stage. So, in all of these expressions, they are looking for validation, they are looking for belonging, they are looking for answers to the most fundamental questions of their life. And this is the recipe. This is a very fertile ground for confusion. It's a very fertile ground for peer pressure and the crisis of confidence. So if you have a young person who is contemplating all of what I've just talked about, and you have a very strong voice, it doesn't matter that that voice might also be as confused as they are, but that voice is strong. Keyword strong. And you have a very strong voice, a person who is communicating a very strong stance on issues, on a particular matter. They are very likely, as a natural consequence of the state where they are, going to bite into the conversations of this strong voice. And that is what we then as peer pressure. So they hang out at school, they are trying to define who they are socially, they're trying to define who they are culturally, they're trying to define who they are on a personal level. And they have this example of somebody who seems to have defined it. That is, yeah, that is where you have the crisis of confidence, whether your child is going to be able to, whether your child is going to be able to stay focused. But the question is focused on what? Unless they have defined and found answers to those questions, there is nothing to focus on. There's nothing to focus on. So there are a few things that fuel identity crisis for young persons. There are several factors that contribute to the identity crisis that teenagers face. I'm going to share about five of them. Number one is peer pressure, because I've already started on that. That desire to fit in can cause your teenager to suppress who they are. Maybe in this case, who they ought to be, because they really don't know who they are. They have not defined who they should be. And so the desire to fit in is going to cause them to suppress who they are in favor of becoming who someone else wants them to be, or who someone else has told them to be. So if the loudest voice in the room is telling the teenager that you should be a musician, they're most likely going to think that oh, I was born to be a musician. If the loudest voice in the room is telling your teenager, oh, that you are not a boy, you're something else, they are most likely going to begin to think in that direction. If the loudest voice in the room is telling them, oh, you're a footballer, they're most likely going to begin to think in that direction. If the loudest voice in the room is telling them you're a pastor, they are also going to most likely begin to think in that direction. Whatever they decide to do, peer pressure, if they give into it, is because of a genuine desire to fit into something. For that desire to fit in is a lack of definition of who I am, or who I should be, or who I'm meant to be in this circumstance. And whereas they have not answered that question and they are trying to fit in, it will lead to an even more deeper or higher levels of conflict in themselves. That's how insecurities are created, because in every environment where they find themselves, there's always going to be a loud voice. And depending on how many loud voices there are in those different environments, they will always tend to that loudest voice. So today, the loudest voice is music. That's where they go. Tomorrow, the loudest voice is one crazy person on the internet. That's where they go. Tomorrow, the loudest voice is a footballer. So that's how they football. Another day, the other loudest voice is somebody who is a sports betting, and so that's how they go. So peer pressure is one big factor fueling the identity crisis of young people. The second big factor that I'm going to talk about is social media influence. If you can, and I believe that you can, your teenagers influence from social media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and where there is Snapchat, all of those platforms. They paint a distorted image of success for young people. They paint a distorted image of success, but it's not just success now. There's an image of success, there's an image of beauty, there's an image of happiness, there's an image of wealth, and every other concept that you can think about in the face of the earth. And teenagers are forced to compare themselves with influencers, celebrities, even their friends who make it onto this platform. And these levels of comparison make them to question their own worth and question their own truth. Until a young person has developed a healthy, strong sense of identity, they have no business on social media. Else, they will just become consumer of whatever is available on the internet. You want to have your child come onto that space with a developed sense of identity, with a strong sense of self, because it is from that sense of self that contribution can be made. Anything other than that, you can't contribute nothing. You're just a consumer, just a consumer of content. And so, like I said, if you can keep your teenagers away from the influence of social media. Now, social media goes even up to your smart television. But more factors or other factors, the family expectations, and that's where you come in as a parent. Whether intentional or not, sometimes so you're supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be like your elder brother, your younger brother, or why can't you see your your mate and things like that? Why can't you become more like your sibling? Why can't you become like this person? So we keep making these comparisons for young people, and it can create more confusion and sometimes even resentment in your teenager. So I talked about when you have a rebellious teenager, most of the time, what you have is a teenager who is grappling with identity crisis. There are so many things that lead to rebellion when it comes to teen rebellion. There are so many things that can lead to it. absent parents do not know that they indirectly create rebellion in their teenagers, whether it's an absent father or an absent mom. But I think I've seen this more in the absent father situation. So you create a lot of confusion in the life of a young person, and that confusion many times will breed resentment, will breed rebellion in teens because they are trying now to find their own worth. When parents are not actively involved in the lives of their teenagers, teenagers are left to try to define their sense of worth because young people draw a lot of their sense of identity from their parents. And so when the parent is absent, they are forced find that sense of identity from whatever else is close to them. So family expectations. I delve into two things. Family expectations include the expectations you put or impose on your child, who you think they should be, the things that you did not complete to do in your own generation, and you want to finish completing it in the life of your teenager. So you put all of those expectations on your teenager. But family dynamics also, in cases where families have their own issues, whether it is conflict among parents or absentee parents, absent fathers, absent mothers, all of those family dynamics create confusion in the life of young people. Probably, of rebellion, and that's why I'm emphasizing on this. A lot of times when you see teenagers rebel, a lot of times when parents come to me and they say, "Oh, this guy is this and this and that," if you go and boil down through the issues, you're going to find that this rebellion is fueled by some imbalance in family relationships. And rebellion is just one way that young people act out their struggle with identity crisis. Other things that contribute to fueling identity crisis are emotional issues, depression, anxiety, and all of those things contribute to a sense of identity crisis for teenagers. Because I said in the beginning that one of the things that a healthy identity does for a young person is that it gives you a sense of focus. It gives you something to wake up to. It gives you purpose. It gives you direction. In the absence of that, there's nothing to focus on. There is no direction for life. It's a very good breeding ground for mental health issues like anxiety and depression, low self-esteem, and every other thing that you can think about. When teenagers struggle emotionally, it becomes harder for them to understand who they truly are. So again, this is one of those vicious circles that I discussed. So a lack of healthy identity is going to produce some emotional challenge like anxiety and depression because there's a whole lot you're grappling with. There's a whole lot that you're trying to live up to. There's so much expectation that you're trying to live up with that you don't even know which one is correct and which one is right from wrong. And then that struggle emotionally also exacerbates the problem, makes it harder for them to understand who they truly are. And unless there is a skilled intervention, unless there is a careful intervention and helping that young person point them in the right direction, they're just going to continue in that and keep sinking deeper and deeper in those emotional struggles. I said I want to discuss five things, that contribute to to identity crisis for young people, lack of guidance, a lack of guidance. At the particular season in the Teen Success Academy, we focused on helping young people find credible role models that they can model themselves around, model their lives around, without clear guidance from a trusted adult. This is where again I'm going to mention the problem of absentee parents. Without clear guidance from a trusted adult, without clear direction, without clear examples without clear modeling of what this life should be about. It takes a model to teach a young person how to go about their lives. It takes a man to teach a boy how to be a man. Likewise, it takes a woman to teach a girl how to be a woman. So, without these kinds of clear guidance from trusted adults, from credible individuals, your teenager can often feel lost, and they are going to always resort to trial and error. That trial and error is in a bid to figure out exactly who they are and what they are supposed to be doing. A number of other issues contribute to teen identity crisis. But then the result is costly. The result is costly. If you see adults who struggle with identity crisis, you will also it's one of those very expensive consequences of not discovering your identity and developing a healthy identity when you show that. I usually make a joke and say when you have 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds attending purpose discovery conferences, is the cost of unresolved identity crisis. When identity crisis in the life of a young person is left unresolved, it can lead to a number of challenges. The most basic one, low self-esteem. When your teenager starts to struggle with their self-worth, if they don't feel that they measure up to standards of society, it's a breeding ground for all manner of vices. It's a breeding ground for all manner of vices. A breeding ground for prostitution, is a breeding ground for alcohol and drug abuse, is a breeding ground for all manner of addictions. That life is a breeding ground for everything you can think about that can go wrong. Because all of it is in a bid to gain acceptance, to gain relevance, to gain some level of identity. If identity crisis is not resolved, you're going to produce a confused person, confused purpose. What, what is that popular saying that when purpose is unknown, abuse is inevitable? Without a clear sense of self, it is going to be difficult to set meaningful goals, to help your teenager set meaningful goals and help them stay consistent, take consistent action towards their future. The reason why your teenager is struggling with focus, one of the reasons why your teenager is struggling with focus, one of the reasons why your teenager is struggling with direction, one of the reasons why your teenager is struggling to get serious with whatever it is they are doing, it has not been connected. There's no connection between what I'm doing today and who I am meant to be and what my role in society is, what my future is supposed to be about. Until a young person can make, and it's a very difficult connection to make because it's about the ability to discuss actions and consequences, to understand actions and consequences. And that is a very difficult conversation to have with a young person. So that is why it requires guidance, it requires mentorship, it requires parenting actively, it requires coaching to help your teenager develop that sense of identity that clearly helps them stay consistent in taking action. Of course, young people will be young people, they're going to make their mistakes, they're not going to be perfect. Adults are not perfect either, but they are going to live their life with some kind of vision minded. And identity crisis is unresolved. You're also going to create an avenue for strained relationship. I talk about rebellion. A teenager in identity crisis will most likely rebel. They will rebel against authority. They're going to act out in ways that negatively affect their relationships, whether it is relationship with their parents or relationship with their siblings or relationship with their peers. That acting out is see it as a signal, see it as a red light, something that you should that should tell you that something is off somewhere. There that is constantly creating problems everywhere they go, causing quarrels with authority figures, Any kind of authority figure, including security man at the gate, your teacher will quarrel with them. The reason is they have not understood and they have not been guided to develop a sense of who I am. Resolving identity crisis for your team is going to solve a lot of problems for you and for them. When they come into spaces, they know how they are supposed to carry themselves in those spaces. It is a healthy identity that creates that kind of young person. When they build relationships, they know what their role in those different relationships. If you do not help a teenager resolve identity crisis, they're going to experience a lot of emotional instability. Think about it, even as an adult, when your mind is fuzzy, when you are not clear as to what exactly you're supposed to be doing, when you are confused about a certain line of action, it produces frustration. Sometimes it produces sadness. It can even produce depression. If you don't help a young person resolve identity crisis, they are going to keep grappling with these emotional issues, and it will keep spiraling and spiraling down into deeper issues. It will keep spiraling into some things that you consider unrelated. Yes, it can also spiral into all of that. So how can you help? How can you help your teenager navigate this crisis? Because it is going to happen. There's no circumventing it. It's going to happen. You're going to Your role will be to help your teenager, equip them with the skills and the tools to navigate that season of their life. Build for them a foundation of truth-based identity. What I call truth-based identity, an identity that is grounded in truth, an identity that is grounded in a solid conversation. You as a parent have a critical role to play when it comes to shaping your teenager's identity. The truth is, the world that we live in pushes a lot of narratives in the direction of the teenager, and teenagers are the market. I've used that word. The world that we live in pushes a lot of external identities on our teenagers. They give them a lot of labels based on appearance, labels based on status, labels based on achievement. On Instagram and TikTok now, the amount of the I call it the breast and bum bum industry. The breast and bum bum industry on Instagram is so big. That industry is well analyzed, and that applies to the girls. Whereas the target is both boys and girls, anyways, for different reasons. But then the betting industry, the ritual industry, the quick money industry, the Yahoo industry that is targeted at young boys also uses all of these labels to sell their market. So one is a label based on appearance, the other is a label based on status and achievement. But a true identity for your teenager that can withstand all of those assaults is something that is deeper than appearance, achievement, status, what I own, what I drive, the kind of phone I use, and all of that. It is an identity that is anchored on eternal truths about, about who the young person can identify themselves. And so help your teenager anchor their identity on such truths. The truth that tells your teenager that their identity and their sense of self-worth is not determined by external factors. It's not determined by external. So I want to ask parents, do you know who you are parenting? Who are you parenting? The fact that you were disconnected for a while. Okay, I think we're back. Apologies, got disconnected for a while. I was talking about a truth-based identity. Remind your teenager about the fact that they have an assignment to fulfill, a purpose that they have in this world. Like I said, that God has a unique plan for each and every one of us, and their life should be lived in pursuit first of discovering that agenda and then pursuing the accomplishment of that agenda. Point them in that direction and give them the permission to walk in that life, to walk in that truth, to walk in their own uniqueness, to embrace that uniqueness. Help them to establish their individuality and feel whole to walk in that individuality. Another way to do this is by constantly engaging your teenager in very deep, meaningful conversation. How are you? Fine. Good morning. Good morning. Are you back from? Yes. What did you? Where's your this report start and things like that? That's important as those are. They are not the things that help your child to develop a healthy sense of identity. Create an environment where your teenager is safe to talk about their struggles, safe to ask questions because developing a healthy identity comes with a lot of questions and asking of questions. So your home environment will be such that they are able to have these conversations, ask these questions, share their struggles, talk about their concerns. Find out what your teenager feels is missing in their lives today because when they go out and talk with all of their peers, they come back with these questions, and the questions are there. Unless you ask, you will not be able to spark the kind of conversations that helps you to feed the right kind of answers to those questions. Find out what your teenager feels is missing in their life. Something somebody has that they don't have. Find out what's going on in their world. Find out if they feel any kind of pressure to be like somebody who they are not. These are the kind of conversations you should be having. And when you enter into these kinds of conversation, you must, as a parent, be willing to listen without judgment. You must be willing to offer guidance. You must be willing to give them opportunities to disagree with some of your points of view. That's how I think that. So a parent recently struggling with a toddler because the toddler said no to something. That's how identity are built. If you continue to shut down that child, just like you have been shut down, just like you were probably shut down, you continue to shut down that child, shut down your teenager. That's how you also deprive them of the opportunity to develop a healthy sense of identity, a healthy sense of self. And so you wonder why your teenager has lost ability to say no to all manner of vices around their life, to all manner of peer pressure around their life. It started by you refusing them the ability to say no in a safe space like the home. No is not always a rebellion. Expression in your life has extra level of guidance. I always say you must be careful to be the positive role model that your teenager needs. Your teenager will naturally observe and model much of their identity after yours. That the teenager that you're raising today, would that child be excited to say, I want to be like my father, or I want to be like my mother? And that conversation has nothing to do with job or career that you have. That to yourself. It's about the identity that you have. So you see, if all your identity revolves around the fact that you're a banker, now we have a problem. After we have your career title, your chieftaincy title, your academic qualification, doctor, professor, and all of this, after we have stripped off all of that, as a parent, who are you? And that person is who your senior is relating with. But if they do not know who you are, then they are also going to struggle with developing their own sense of identity. They're also going to struggle with sense of identity. So, see living out your values, you will see living life beyond all of these external definitions and all of the labels that the world chooses to put on humans. Then they will be more likely to be able to develop the capacity to live the same way. If you're the kind of person that works in integrity, works in purpose, works in authenticity, in what you say. And then finally help them embrace their own. I've said that it takes a sense of identity. Identity is not a static thing. Identity evolves. Um, I'm not very comfortable with the word evolve. Identity grows. Identity transforms. As a person is growing, they are maturing. They are learning more about themselves. As they go through the different phases of life, you're going to want to encourage them to see each of those exploration as health as now. So who you were in primary school is going to be different from junior secondary school. Is going to be different from the expression of yourself senior secondary school student. Uh, it's going to be different from the expression of yourself as an undergraduate. Those are the different phases of part of this. So if just embrace, all the different phases, because sometimes it's also a carried over expectation that might be happening, but we don't have time into that part of the conversation. Just simply provide your teenager with opportunities to discover their strengths, discover their interests, and to practice those interests and strengths. To get in spaces where express those interests and those abilities, passions. That's why we do boot camps. That's why we have coaching, uh, mentorship academy. Whether it is through sports, arts, leadership coaching, different kinds of activities, simply allowing your child be in those spaces where they are able to do things different from the routine, go to school and come back, write exams and pass. All other extras will give them freedom to grow and to develop that identity into what it should be. Into what it should be. Time is fast, so I'm not going to touch more on some other things, but I'm going to mention the fact that you need to help your teenagers boundaries, protect them of their identity. As they navigate challenges of their identity, you need to protect them from all those influences that we at the beginning. Influences from influences of media, stuff like that. We need to know boundaries, meaning boundaries around screen time, boundaries around friends, boundaries around relationship, boundaries around money, even their emotions, boundaries around personal behavior and how much they can be involved in certain kinds of activities or not. When you set, especially with implementing those boundaries, we help them develop structure. It's like identity also is developed in a structured environment. Because the world is not a place to be. That's where I'm going to like have a lot more to cover, but maybe in our subsequent conversations on Friday that we look at all of the other dimensions of it. Share with me your thoughts in the comment section, and if you have any questions, also let's on your experiences with your team on any of our contacts scrolling on your screen.